Hey everyone, we're back with another episode. I have my next guest with me, Mr. Scott Allan. Scott, thank you so much for being with us today. How are you doing on this lovely, well, technically you're in Japan, so it's a lovely morning for you, but an evening for us here in New York. But how is your morning going?
It's going great, thanks. Having a great time.
Awesome.
And thanks for having
Are
me
you
on the show.
are you normally an early riser, or are you more of a sleep in a little bit?
Probably depends. Maybe on Sunday I'll sleep in a little bit, but it's Saturday here, so I generally get up 5 or 5:30. So it's 8 o'clock. So I've already gotten a few hours of work in.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much. We're going to have some great topics to talk about today. We'll talk about the fear that contributes to procrastination, what strategies you can recommend doing to overcome that. And we'll talk about your book and get to know you a little bit. So I'll start you off with the icebreaker question. Who is Scott Allan? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you come to writing this book about procrastination?
Sure thing. So yes, my name's Scott Allan, and I'm an author, motivational speaker, and I've been living in Japan for about 25 or 26 years. And there's probably a long story that goes into that, but I'll jump into the procrastination book and we can circle back on the story if you like.
Sure.
All right.
Sounds good.
But I think the Do the Hard Things First came out a few years ago. I think it's coming up on its 3rd anniversary. There are 3 books in this series now with a 4th one coming out. But I came across, I came about writing that book because at the time I was dealing with, I've always been dealing with a lot of chronic procrastination. And I've always labeled myself as a procrastinator, and I just hated that label, because every time I would feed into that label of, I don't do something because I'm a procrastinator, I wouldn't do it. And I noticed this pattern where things were just, stacking up all the time, things that had to be done, whether it was a clutter in the corner of the room or it was an application form that was pending me. Like I couldn't, I didn't fill it out. So, I had a loan that was pending. Like it was just all these things that I would put off because they're difficult to do. And so I decided not to do that anymore. I just made a decision that what if I stopped calling myself a procrastinator, started calling myself an action taker? So I had to make that mindset switch. And when I did, I noticed that I started doing these things that were hard. I started doing 1 thing a day or 2 things a day. And then I came about the book was just, because I'm an author, I'm always coming up with ideas. And I thought, well, if I build a system for this, then I can, teach other people how to do it as well. So the book came about from that, from my own experience of going through that. And sure, procrastination is not a new topic. There are a lot of books out there and there's a lot of content out there, but I had to put my thing out there just because I think, honestly, I probably did it for myself to begin with, but a lot of people, it resonated with a lot of people, not everybody, but I had a lot of people who wanted to know more about it, more about the process. And I revised it a couple of times as well. So the original version that went out back in 2021 is slightly different from the version that's out now. We recently revised it, and I'll probably give it another revision. Well, just, I believe in refining the content. And as you work through the system, you find things that didn't work as well, that in some things you need to add in a little more spice here and there to make them work better. So, but that's just been an ongoing battle with me and with a lot of people apparently. So, and it doesn't have to be, which is kind of like what the book dives into is it's not like you don't have to build yourself up with mental toughness. I mean, that might be part of it. You might become that from doing hard things, but you don't have to, wait to be ready. And I think I was always waiting to be ready to do something, and that what happens with that is that we think, okay, well, I'm not ready yet, so I'll just put it off till tomorrow. And then it becomes a habit of putting it off until, tomorrow becomes next week, becomes next year. And then finally you realize maybe it's too late. Maybe now I can't do that thing that I should have done a year ago, and that opportunity has passed me by. So I think that's one of the goals of the book is to save people from having that regret, when they get to some point in the future and they look back and they're like, oh, if I just done some of that difficult work 5 years ago, maybe I could have changed my life. And then once we get into that mindset, then it becomes even harder because now we're living with regret and we're feeling worse about ourselves. And now it's even harder to move forward. So.
And do you think, well, not think, but you probably get this question a lot. Is there a difference between procrastinating, being lazy, or just plain right making excuses for certain things? Like, are those things that are tied in together?
They're definitely tied in together because the excuses just comes from the fear of moving forward with doing the hard thing, whatever that might be, right? So I'll give an example. Like an excuse would be, I'd always had the excuse that, well, I'm not ready yet because I have to wait for this thing maybe I'm waiting on somebody to give me something, or it was always an excuse of like, it doesn't have to be done today, because it can wait till tomorrow. Give an example of could be cleaning your kitchen, right? It's like, well, I could do it today, but if I wait until tomorrow, I'll probably, I'll have more energy. I'm off tomorrow, whatever it be. But then tomorrow comes around and you find something else to do. And when you actually look at it, the truth is you don't really want to clean the kitchen, but it has to be done. It's not done by me. It's not going to get done by anybody else because I don't have a house clean. Right. So the excuses are really just, they're designed to, keep you stuck basically. And we all have excuses for everything. Why we can't buy that thing we want, or why we can't get that job we want, or, get a date with that person we want. There's always an excuse behind it. And the excuse is usually associated with an internal deficiency. So, I'm not enough. So I'm just going to, and then we come up with an excuse or two why it can't be done. We believe in it. And then that disbelief, or call it a negative belief, holds us back from actually moving forward. And that's where the fear is associated with the excuse, because by not moving forward, we're removing ourselves from the risk of looking bad, the risk of failure, all of these things that are tied to the fear. There is fear in taking action towards something that you've never done before, or one of those hard things. There's fear around that, because not just the fear of failure, but it's the uncertainty, right? It's the fear of discomfort. We buy into a lot of comfort and say, well, if what if I take action and I fail at this thing, and then I'm just going to prove to myself that I really am worthless and I really can't do this thing. But that's the great thing about failure, is that it's just going to teach you a different way to try something.
And, that's one of the questions we talked about was, what is the strategies you recommend for someone to overcome that fear, to say, make me get this done. Like, let's go through this. Let's push forward. What do you recommend, or what are things you can do to help with that?
Yeah. So what happens is that we become very overwhelmed with all the things that we can be doing. I mean, we're all busy, but I think we're a lot busier than we actually need to be. We just make ourselves really busy, and whether that's scrolling through TikTok or, which I have nothing wrong with that. I enjoy doing that, but there's time for that, and there's a time when we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
But what happens there is that we just become very overwhelmed. So for me, like I had to break down, first of all, recognize that I'm becoming overwhelmed because I've got all these like 20 things I want to do. So I just would sit down. I made a list of everything that I was putting off. And that's the thing, like clarity is the key. So you want to make a list of everything, get it down on paper, write it on the computer, whatever it takes. It's going to be in front of you. Get it out of your head, down on paper. Now you can see it. And when I made a list, I had 50 things on the list, forms that I hadn't filled out, things I hadn't applied for. The house was a mess, you name it, just everything. And I realized that when I looked at each of these, each of them in and of themselves was a mini project, right? So I noticed like the overwhelm and the, just like the anxiety that I had around all these things, because we're holding all this inside. I just selected one of the things on the list. I'm like, okay, well, I can actually do this thing today. I selected, maybe it wasn't the hardest thing on the list, but I had to start somewhere, because that's really like, you need momentum. So I would choose one thing on the list, and I was like, I can get a quick win with this right now. It might take me half an hour. So I would choose that thing on the list, set my clock for half an hour, my timer, and I would work on that thing. And I got that first thing done in like 15 minutes. And I was like, okay, well, what's the next thing? Cross it off, right? Now you're crossing things off on your list. Now you see that things are actually being done. And you don't have to
Yeah.
do all these. And it's not like doing them all in one day. But if you
Sure.
show up every day, and if I hacked away at one of these things on the list every day, within 2 months, I could have most of them done. Now, my list might continue to grow, but that's the good thing about it is that, because we're never done, we're like working on these things, but I identified some of these things on the list were on there for a long time, and these were things that should have been done a long time ago. But that's the thing, is like breaking it down, knowing exactly what it is that you want to work towards, because, and again, whether it has to do with cleaning your house, filling out application forms, like going somewhere in town because you have to get something done. Like these are things that are, are significantly like holding you back. Right. So I broke everything down into small steps. And that's one of the things, and this wasn't maybe not a new concept, but blocking in the time, breaking it down to a small step where, if I have to make a phone call, great. That was another thing I would always put off, is like making phone calls, making difficult phone calls
Oh man.
to the tax department. Who wants to do that? But I was like,
no one does.
Yeah. What does it take to? Okay, so first of all, I need the number. So it's like I would literally just break it down into small steps. I don't even have the number, and I know I need to call them. So there, got the number. Got the phone in my hand. I'm going to call this person. And then like it sounds really silly, but actually this is something that I would put off for days and weeks. And the phone calls from their end they're not stopping. They're still calling you, but, and I'm just using the tax department as an example. They weren't calling me, but it was like another credit agency. It's like, I've got to contact them to get this thing done. And the fear was holding me back from actually answering the phone. Right. So that became a hard thing, and it really builds up in the mind. It's just, it starts as overwhelm. It overlaps into like you've got fear around this because it's something that you don't want to do.
And that goes into our second question. Thank you for the explanation. Is that what roles does mindset play in overcoming procrastination, and how can one cultivate an attitude conductive to productivity? I think I'll use myself as an example. I think this podcast is one for me. I work full time. I still do this, but there's times that like I have a schedule or routine. I want to have a podcast out by a certain time. And so I learned to rely mostly on my calendar for the most part and be like, okay, I know it comes out on Wednesdays and Fridays. So let me know. I know I have the weekends because I'm off on the weekends. Let me go ahead and just get these things done. Let me go ahead and put my content together and just publish them. But for some reason, I wait till the last minute or the night before. And I'm like, why am I doing that? And I thought to myself, is it because I know it's easy to do? And sometimes with some tasks are very easy, like, oh, it's easy, so I can just push it off till later. And sometimes later it becomes later and later, and then you miss your deadline. And then you're like, oh, crap. Now I'm back to this place. But ideally, I think one of the things is accountability. And obviously you'll go into it more, is that I think you want to be accountable for yourself. I think a lot of times we don't hold ourselves accountable for a lot of things we do. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, take those small wins. I had to mass produce a couple of podcasts because I know I'm going to be out of town and I know I'm not going to get it done. So it's like, before I know I get to this point, when I have the time now, let me go on my calendar, set this up, do this, and get it done. And honestly, Scott, I'll tell you, I felt so much better afterwards. And I think it's like you said, it's those little things. I think when you take the bigger tasks, I think sometimes you do a hierarchy in your head. I was supposed to write a couple of chapters in my book, still haven't done it. But it's like you take these big steps, and then you're like, well, how about, like you said, start with the little ones first, and then the bigger ones you start taking on become a little less scary, and it becomes a little less like, I can't do this, or the fact of, if I fail, I fail. I mean, the whole American way is failing. Let's be honest. Our country was built in the first place. So ideally, I think it's a mind over matter thing, and realizing to take the negativity out of everyone else and your outside naysayers and push yourself. And kind of same thing with my degree as well too. I went back to school later in life and I finished my degree, and I kept thinking, oh my God, I think one thing I told myself, if I tell anyone I'm going to get my degree, I'm never going to finish it because I know it's pressure on myself. But if I say, if someone asks me, oh, were you in school? Yeah, I'm in school. That alone, I think, helped me realize that, you know what, I can get through this and I can do this. Because I think when you put such a production on of like, I'm going to get this done and make this happen, it's hard and it's pressure. And I think a lot of people and authors and writers, I think, have a lot of struggle with that as well, where it's like, maybe you have a deadline. Maybe your editor or your publisher is like, you need to have this book out by next year. And so it's kind of like, I think of the author of Game of Thrones, and God knows he's never going to finish that book. But, I think it's pressure being like, it's a lot to do, but I think taking that one first step is important. And like you're saying, don't think too much about it. I think we overthink things. I mean, I don't know if you agree or not, but I think sometimes we just overthink things in general. And I think when you overthink things, you just don't get anything done. And the next thing you know, the time passed, you didn't get it done. And then you're right back at square one. And then that bleeds into your personal life. That bleeds into your work life. That bleeds into so many other things that happens. And you either become a flake or you become someone who just never gets anything done. And then that just kind of bleeds into everything altogether.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And then that becomes your identity, because what we're actually building is the identity of, I'm someone who doesn't really get things done. And then, your energy, your thoughts, everything starts believing in that concept. That's the mindset you create for yourself and then you become that label, you start referring to yourself as, I'm a procrastinator. Or actually, it's a behavior. That's it. And behavior can be changed, right?
It can. I think it's tough, but it definitely can be changed. I think a lot of times we get in this mindset we can't change behaviors, but I mean, we were kids once. We don't do the same things we do as kids, do we? We're adults now. Are you out? Well, I don't know. Some adults can be kids, but for the most part, you learn how to do certain things and you don't repeat those things as you get older. So I do agree with that on that aspect. And then, I think another thing you kind of mentioned was, I think setting those small goals and maybe having a tool for you. Would you agree it'd be something that would kind of help you in a way and finding your own groove? I mean, one tool that works for me may not work for you, may not work for the next person, but it's finding your groove and being okay with finding what works for you. I have some friends who has a daily planner. I think it's hilarious that she has it, but for her, it keeps her organized. She has it for years. And it's something that she always keeps with her. And it's like, and it keeps her very organized and this and that. And I'm like, that's amazing. I couldn't do that. I have digital technology, which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but it's the analog of it that some people like to do with and makes it feel, okay, I wrote it down. Okay, I know I did this. I gotta get this done. For me, it's like I type it in or my Siri would tell me and I'm like, I feel a little better about that because it's like, it reminds me and I'm like, oh, shoot. And I've been learning now that when you have so many thoughts in your head going on, it is good to jot those down and write them down. Or you say, hey, Siri, here's a note. I have this and I need to call my aunt back. I have to do this and that. Schedule things, get them done, and kind of really stick to that schedule. Because once you do that, it makes people want to be more engaged with you, but also it makes you feel a little better that you got something accomplished. And I do feel better after that. I think a lot of people do feel better after like, wow, finally got that project done. And be okay with knowing it takes a while. Some projects are not going to happen overnight. I'm not going to write a whole novel in one night. You probably could, but I don't think in reality that's going to happen.
Yeah. No, I love that, like breaking things down into small steps. So I've always taken that approach to writing books too. Like I coach a lot of authors on writing, and that's the number one thing that holds them back is writing. So because the project is, a 30, 40, 50,000 word book is very overwhelming. So to this day, I just break it down into a small process. So I use the Jerry Seinfeld's method of don't break the chain. So the calendar, like I like to see things on like the daily planner, by the way. I bought one of those recently.
Really?
I have things in my Google Calendar as well. The thing is, with so much digital data, I often forget that it's there. So the daily planner is just kind of like it's like a backup. So I actually have things written down twice, so I don't miss them because I was missing them.
Yeah.
But back to the the novel approach is like my goal every day is to write 2,000 words per day. It's 2,000 words of content. It takes me about 19 minutes to do this, maybe. Yeah. But at the end of the day, on my calendar, I would just check it off green. Like that on that day it would be a green check mark. And if I didn't write 2,000 words a day, it would get an X. And this doesn't mean if I wrote 1,900 words and it was close enough, it wouldn't get a green check. It would get a red
Right.
mark.
Right.
My goal was this, and if I know, like, I can look at my calendar and see 20 green check marks on that month, maybe there's a few X's too.
Mm-hmm.
At least I can see, okay, well, there's actually a lot of progress here made, and every check mark represents 2,000 words, which means, add that up. I probably wrote a rough draft in this month. And that just seems to work. I don't do that now for writing, but I do it for other things,
Right.
other projects that I'm working towards. So you're right. Like, yeah, you have to customize what works best for you. Try different things, but overall, I think breaking it down into smaller steps, and whether it's the 2-minute rule, a 5-minute rule, blocking it into your calendar for 30 minutes, but you're just committing to, like the accountability. I think for me, it's always easier to be accountable to somebody else. Most people have a job, so they have to be at work at 9 a.m. because
Sure.
they're accountable to their coworkers and their manager. And if they don't show up, they don't get paid. But it's
Yeah.
a different thing when you're accountable to yourself. I find it's a lot easier to say, I mean,
So
I put
true.
this in my calendar and, well, no one's
Yeah.
going to know if I don't do it anyway. And that's when it starts. It's like, well, no one's going to know if I don't do it. So you start to cheat yourself and think it's
Mm-hmm.
okay, but
Mm-hmm.
you do, it, right? And that's where the procrastination starts, and the behavior of, like, I'm just going to put it off one more day, and because no one's going to know. But the thing is,
Yeah.
like, the number one person who actually you should be showing up for is yourself, and a lot of us don't do that. So
Yeah, that's so true. Because I think at the end of the day, you kind of feel, and I don't know, there's no clinical way of putting this because I'm not a therapist, but I do think that could lead to a level of either depression or some kind of sadness, because it's almost like you want to keep trying some things, and then it's just like, oh, I'm gonna do it, and then you're like, no, and then it gets and that leads to different things of if it's stress eating, if it's not taking care of yourself, or just not really progressing, and you kind of get in a way of a slump, and so you kind of just like in this place, and you just don't move forward.
mm-hmm.
I'm getting life right now, Scott. I really am. But I think ideally it, it takes not, well, here's the way I look at it, because we're going to the next question. It's realizing that some of your tasks and some of your things that you work on are very complex. Like getting a college degree, you wish you probably could get it nowadays. I don't know, 24 months, whatever case is. But these are things that take time. They're not going to happen overnight. Write a novel, maybe something to do with your home renovations, working on your finances, taking care of a family member, planning a trip. I don't know, just random things. There's just things that take a while to do. Building things, obviously, What is kind of your suggestion or techniques you can do, or someone can do, to focus on those kind of complex tasks? And we talk about the little things, but what are the things they can do to really help them with these kind of very big tasks? Getting married is one I thought about, because I have like weddings to go to every day, and I know those are not easy to put together. So what are some of the things you can suggest outside of what we talked about that can help with those complex tasks?
Sure. Yeah. So again, like when it comes to complex tasks, let's just take like getting married is actually a good example, because there's so much planning that goes into that. I think I probably, we spent a long time on that, and it took about 6 or 7 months of planning. And there's so many things that we had to do every day, and they had to be done by us and then the wedding planners and that kind of thing. So anyway, just using that as an example, we could take, creating a website, another complex project, which I'm working on. So actually, I'll use that as the example. When I started building the website or websites, it was another one of those overwhelming tasks that I actually put off for years, right? I knew I had to get this done. I wanted, and this is the key, I wanted to do it. I really wanted to have this, great website selling all these products and offering all these things. And I realized, like, every time I thought about it, it just became one of those things, well, I don't have time for this today, because again, there's like so many things that go into that. So I sat down with this complex project. You can do this for just about anything. And I made again, I love lists because lists work. I made a list of all the things potentially that have to go into this. And I know this sounds very familiar to what I already mentioned, but doesn't really change whether it comes down to filling out an application form or doing a complex task. It's all
Right.
about the clarity of the action steps that need to be done so you can actually eventually finish this thing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started to put together this long list of everything, I just went to Google Docs and I just started typing up everything. And I would go to, I'd research what other people had done to get their websites done. And then I just realized like, oh, okay, so I need a domain name. I need this, this, and this. And when I realized what I needed to do, I could just spend 5 or 10 minutes. And some of these tasks would take longer than that. A lot of them I didn't know how to do as well. And that's the other thing is like, you may not know how to do a lot of these things. So it comes down to like, how do I do this? Or more importantly, who do I hire to get this thing done?
Yes.
And that's where a lot of people get stuck, myself included. It's like, okay, well, how do I build the website? Or better yet, who do I hire or who can I hire to help me build this website? And that's when things started moving forward, because I was always thinking, I need to be the one to go in and set this whole thing up. But when I actually hired someone to help and we were working together on this, went by so much. We had things set up within like a week or two, whereas like I put it off for 2 years, because I believed I had to be the one to do it and put everything together. And I tried to, and I actually did get, I've done websites in the past, again, just using this as an example, but
sure,
always ask yourself, like, you don't have to be the one to do all the hard things on the list. You just need to get it done. And that's really it, So I made it so on that long list of things I made, I would go, okay, well, I can do these things. These things I'm going to outsource to someone on, I can hire someone on Fiverr or Upwork, which I did. And I had other people working on things that I technically just really struggled with or didn't have the time for while I was over here working on something else. And and that's the great thing too, is like when it comes back to the accountability, when you hire someone else to help you with something, they're following up with you asking, because maybe they're waiting on you to do something so they can get their thing done as well. So you end up working together. And but I guess that's why teamwork's very important, of course. But
absolutely, yeah. I think it's a great example, because I kind of do the same thing on my website, and you're right. I think also another thing is our minds, that we get this level of cockiness. People don't want to admit this to themselves, but they do. But two things: you don't want to admit when you're wrong about something sometimes, and then also you don't want to admit you don't know something. It makes you feel stupid or inadequate, whatever the case is. And so, but the whole point and foundation, and we did this in class, or I learned this in class, is that the whole point is you're in class, you're learning this. Of course, you don't know this. You're in class to learn this. So I had to take the mindset of being like you said, you do the minimal things of going in and doing it, but you have to realize at the same time, you're not going to know everything. And you may have to get some assistance in the process of doing that. But time those things out. So if you get back to your list, and I love what you said earlier. You said, pick it apart. It's almost like a foundation. I think in the way of when you're building a home or a building, there's always blueprints that have to go into these things. Whatever you do, there's always these formations that you have to, guidelines you have to go by. And as long as you keep following those guidelines, structure, input, taking the time to learn certain things, it becomes more understanding and more rewarding than anything else. And we have to learn to just stop being so critical. I had to personally do that myself. I would go and do the website. You know what I do, Scott? I look at it and I go, this isn't perfect. And also I'm like, why does it have to be perfect? So you have this little devil and the angel, and you're like, but why does it have to be perfect? Oh, if it's not perfect, then it's not good. It's a reflection of me. So it's not going to be great. I can't show this. I'm just going to hold it off and then wait till later. But it's like, once again, the whole point is for you to try it. You're gonna fail. You're gonna make a mistake. But the fact that you even took the time to do it, that's the most important step there. And I think we always get this form of, at least I do, maybe a lot of people are like me, it's like everything that I put out the first time has to be perfect. Now, how many times have you ever seen a screenplay or a TV show or anything that came out that was perfect the first time? Maybe it's happened. I'm not going to say it hasn't, but they're rough drafts for a reason. You go back to the pages, you go back to the page, it's going to change. And half the films you see that are out there was not originally was intended. Why do you think we have deleted scenes? So it's about putting, it's like these things you don't think about. You're like, oh, wow, that's so true. It's like, yeah, it's going to falter at some point, but the foundation's there. You're going to go through the processes and you can go back and rectify it afterwards. We just have to get this mindset of always being so perfect and being, I think a lot of people have this too, where it's like, you say, for you did a great project and this happens to a lot of writers and people I know, or maybe even actors, or whatever the case is, you did one great thing. Now all of a sudden, you have to always do something great.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
not always the case. Like, yes, you want to keep doing great. You always want to do awesome, but you're going to flounder at some point. Not every great writer has a great book every time. There's sometimes that one book is great, the other one not so great. But that's part of the process. And it goes back to what we talked about fear. The fear is that you're keeping this level of perfection, and I think that plays into how perfection and procrastination, I think, go hand in hand sometimes, because you feel like you just have to have it perfect every single time. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just not the case. And I think we have to kind of break that down and say, no, you don't need to have it perfect all the time. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have perfection. You just have to freaking do it and have someone yell at you or yell at yourself and internally be like, Dak, I'm going to do this today. No, I'm going to sit here for 15 minutes, get this done, block everything else out, or use whatever tools you need. Like when I was in school, I would just say, I'll play classical music. For me, that was my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had a project to do. I put on classical music, and 9 or 10 times, I got that project done just in time on the way. Now, I did procrastinate because I knew it was supposed to be in a week ago, and I did wait till the last minute. But that's also, I think it's an endorphin thing for me. And I think it's also not a bad thing to say that some people and sometimes work better under deadlines and pressures. I don't recommend it's a good thing all the time to do, but there has been times where like some of my best work has come out when I was crucial to the deadline. I didn't like that aspect of that because so I had to start tricking myself and say, you know what, if I know a project's due on Friday, I'm going to trick myself and say it's due on Wednesday. So that where that whole fight or flight fear is like, okay, on Wednesday, I feel like it's a deadline. It has to be done. But in reality, I just gave myself 2 days. Now, the scary part is, and I finished it, now I'm going to go back and tweak it for the next 2 days and try to make it perfect again. Once again, my own inside of things. It's like, but ideally, it's almost like you have to find certain tools and you have to really know yourself too. I think become procrastination, you have to really know who you are. You have to know how you as a person. And I think sometimes we don't trust our own instincts. We don't trust our own selves. We don't trust what our processes is because we try to compare it to someone else's process. Oh, well, Susan did it this way or Brian did it that way. Well, that works for Susan and Brian. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You can't compare yourself to other people. We have this whole tendency in our society to do that. So, and social media has put things out here to make it feel that way. Am I going to be the next Sandra Rhimes? Probably not. Or it could be. I don't know. But ideally, you can't compare yourself to that. Everyone has their own process. That's what makes everyone a different artist. It makes everyone different writers. It makes everyone different in every aspect. It's all the same thing, but everyone has a different approach to doing it. And that's okay. You want to have variety in life. You don't want the same over and over again. If you made everything the same again, then what's the point? How fun is that?
Yeah, for sure. I like the trust aspect of it. That's exactly it, because you have to build that trust, but the trust only comes with like showing yourself that you can do this thing, and then when you don't do it, you lose trust in yourself, and then you start to, and so it's just this kind of spiral of self-defeat, and then that becomes, and again, that becomes your behavior. Your default behavior is like to just put it off. And I still catch myself, by the way, doing this every day, every week again. But it's like, there it is again. And you have to identify the words that you use, like the language you use is key, because I find myself still saying, well, I'll get to that tomorrow, or I'll make that call later. So it's like, I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll take care of it soon. And these are actually, for me, it's the trigger language that I use in order for me to continue the behavior of putting something off. And I'm saying this to the other person, but internally I know, like, well, I'm probably not going to get to that. I'm just going to tell them, I'll do it tomorrow. And I don't do it. And then it's like, they ask me again next week. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot about it. Now it's like, I forgot to do it, or, oh yeah, it was on my list. Or my favorite is, oh yeah, I got really busy. I wasn't too, I wasn't busy.
The common thing. Yeah. Well, I use it all the time too.
Yeah. All those things, like they're little, like we're just so used to throwing them out there. But when you catch yourself, it's like, oh, okay. Like every time I use that language, it probably means that I'm looking to, push it off. But, this person needs me to do this thing so they can get their thing done. So you have other people relying on you. And then when you don't get it done, they're they're going to find someone else to do it. Like I found, it's like, okay, well, I didn't
Yeah.
get it done, so they hired someone else, or they just went and asked someone else to get it done.
So
And
true.
there was some relief to that. It's like, oh, good, someone else took care of it. But it's like, well, someone else took care of something I should have done, and now they've got the confidence that I should have gotten. They've got the win that I should have gotten. So
Yeah.
we're just setting ourselves up for failure.
We are. I think, and that's another thing I think would work. And I've learned this being in corporate America for so many years. It's what you just said. It's like you get passed up, someone else can do it. But at the same time, certain daunting tasks happen, and you have to learn to prioritize those things. And I think, like I said earlier, it goes hand in hand. I think if one aspect of your life is on a level of priority and cutting out that, let's say your social life, you're cutting out the procrastination. Okay, I'm gonna go have lunch with Greg. I'm gonna make sure I go have lunch with my Aunt Carol. Like, I think once you start doing that, you start seeing that transcend to like, I'm gonna have that meeting with Jeff. I'm gonna have that meeting with so and so. I'm gonna get this project. I'm gonna break this down day by day. And when you start seeing these things blend together, people have this work-life balance, as they like to say. You start to see such a better improvement. And you have a better mood sense about yourself, where it's just kind of elevates you to a level of saying, if I can do it on one part here, I can do another part here. And that way it connects so much better for you to really get out of that funk and that procrastination. I like to say procrastination is a funk in a way. I feel like it's a level of, and I hate to say this. I know some people, like you said, they use certain, things to say, I can't do this, I can't do that. And it's like, but I've seen people do it. I have a friend who says, oh, I have ADD, ADHD, so I can't do anything. Well, I understand that is a thing. I'm not saying it's wrong. I understand like what goes with that diagnosis. But at the same time, you're still being your own worst enemy. There are people with the same, thing as you and is making it happen. And maybe it's best to kind of learn from them because they're having the same level of handicap, their, disability, whatever you want to call it, as you. That might be inspiring for you to be like, I've seen them do it. What is their tactics? How are they doing this? Someone who doesn't have it may not understand you. They'll look at you like, oh, okay, that's fine. I don't get it. Just do it. Totally understand that. But it's almost like finding likely-minded people as yourself on the same path to really help you understand that. And I think once you do that, you just see such a bigger change. Once again, don't compare yourself to everyone else. Don't try to compare yourself to everyone, but find a tribe if you can, because that helps you feel more motivated to say, if I know so-and-so can do that, it may not be the same way I'm going to do it as them, but I see the tactics they use that can help me because I'm at a different disadvantage to someone else, but I'm going to see they have the same kind of level of disadvantage I have and make it happen. And I'm going to strive for that as well too.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. Like it's good to model other people, and especially the people who have done that thing, because despite their disadvantage, whatever that may be, they did it. And sure, we can, I use those excuses too. I'm sure a lot of people do where, well, I have ADHD and that's why I'm disorganized, so I just become more disorganized. And actually, that becomes okay with me, like, oh, it's okay to be really disorganized and have stuff everywhere because whether it's ADHD or it's some other symptom that's holding me back from that. But now I'm justifying why I'm disorganized when the reality is I know how to organize a desktop. I know how to clean my room, whatever it may be. It's just that I'm using my symptom, whether it's ADHD or something else, as an excuse not to do it.
Yep. That's so true. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there are other symptoms that come with like that may actually very well be the reason why I'm very disorganized.
Of course.
And it probably to a certain extent it might be, but that doesn't mean that I should just give up and say, well, I'm just going to leave it as it is because then you build that like the kind of like a victim mentality or a helplessness, I'm helpless because of this cause. And
you're either the victim or you're the over procrastinator, overthinker, or the overachiever. You always fall within one of these ways. And the over victim thing, I really hate to see that happen with people. I see a lot of people, my friends and stuff, and it's like we understand it's hard, but you also have a support system. You're not alone. You're not like you just can't do it. It's more of like, if you want to talk about it, talk about it. You have a good support friends to do that, and if you feel like we're not good people for that, then let's help you find people that are. I think a lot of times people think they're so alone in processes, but they're not. things just have to overall change, and you have to learn to evolve and grow with those things.
Mm-hmm.
Which another thing is, an issue we maybe brought up earlier is that the evolution of growth and change, and a lot of people just don't want to change.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you can't change, but I think a lot of people just don't want to, you know, which is in a level of procrastination too. You just don't want to change. You don't want to change. Oh, well, I've done this. Like you said, oh, I've done this, I've done that. Well, okay, then I'll just keep doing that. Well, you can, but do you really progress? Do you do anything different? Do you ever reach any potential goals? I've learned to set long-term goals for myself. And ever since I've done that, I've done short-term goals, and somehow I just feel like those always fail for me. But long-term goals have seen the most success because I've built the blueprints to help me do those things. Like I have a major move that I'm working on. And so I know moving to a different country, as you've done yourself, is not an easy task. It's not anything you can say, oh, all right, I'm going to go. Well, maybe you can. If you have a lot of money, you can do what you want to do. But there's always a lot of moving parts that goes with that. And so you want to think of all the steps that go into making that happen. And every time I set a long-term goal for myself, I've always had the most success all the time. Because I thought about the blueprint, I thought about foundation, but I also thought about it's going to take time. I know it's not going to happen overnight. You know that. But as long as I take the necessary steps and do check-ins every so months and this and that, I've seen the best results ever happen.
Yeah, the long-term goal, you can break it down into, because everything like we'll just take a project, for example, a long-term goal. You break it down. There are different, say 5 or 6 big things you need to take care of, right?
Yep.
So let's just say, moving to another country. Okay, well, that requires a visa is one of those things. So that requires within that becomes a little project in and of itself. But now it becomes there's steps around the visa, and then there could be I need money, so that becomes another steps like how where am I going to get the money? How am I going to get the money? And you make a list of tasks that you need. So like the visa application has a process, and you have to go through that. So you just make a list of those steps, and I just break it down that way. So there's layers within those projects or those long-term goals. But that's the thing is when you're clear on what needs to be done, then you can just you can work your way around the each of those mini projects within that goal, and you will get it finished if you keep pushing forward. I think that's just like the consistency of pushing forward with something, whether it's every day or it's every week. You just have to really put in the time and know that like this is if you really want this thing, you will make it happen.
You will. You definitely will. Yeah. I set a goal for myself to finish my other degree by 2024. By the time I turned 41 or 40, whatever. Oh, no, it happened before I turned 40. And I did it, but I knew it was going to take a while. But it was a goal that I achieved, and I was happy for myself. And it was a long-term goal, and I did the steps to do it, and I made it happen. And it's one of the things I don't look back and I regret on because it was something that I knew I was going to get done right away. So, I'm going to get this done like so and so. Well, then I'm pushing myself to not getting it done by doing that. But setting realistic goals, I think, is another thing. And I think sometimes we are very out of touch with reality when it comes to what can and can't be done. You can't go from a credit score of 500 to 720 tomorrow. That's not happening. But if you build foundations of things to kind of get you there, and the things that are steps you need to go, you can achieve that. It's not going to happen overnight, but it can happen. It will. You got to just learn to just do the certain steps to do that and be patient, to make that happen. Now you talked a little bit about, traveling and obviously living abroad or living now in Japan. How does traveling worldwide help you with your journey of self-discovery?
It's just opened up a whole new way of thinking. I think maybe it's just one word, but it's changed my view of everything. I mean, so just to give you an example, like I'm from Canada. Grew up in Halifax, grew up in a small town, and and that's fine. Like loved it, beautiful place, lived on the ocean. I mean, I wouldn't have had it any other way. But when it was time for me, when I made the decision to leave that, it was very scary because I left Halifax, moved up to Vancouver to Japan, and each of those moves was, I don't know if it was scary. It was exciting at the same time too, because what I realized is like. First of all, you're going to meet a lot of people who have, they're living in a different culture. They do things differently than you do. And you either adapt to that or if you're against the way that they're doing something, you don't, and which means you're unwilling to change. And then you may end
Mm.
up, I don't know, going back home or going back to the way things were. And what I found is like from traveling around the world, I was able to just observe other people and talk to other people about, how like their family style and the way that they, the work that they do and, the
Right.
beliefs that they have and just accepting that, well, this is really neat. And I've worked in an international school here that I was running for a long time where, I hired many people from like 40, 50 different countries,
Wow.
so that as well, I would just learn things from people all the time, like listening to their stories actually,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
just being quiet for once and listening to what they were telling me and not really, and, like letting go of my judgments and things like that. Like, oh, that's not how we do things back in, I don't know, Kansas, for example, right?
Right.
You know,
Right.
like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that, you practiced that or you did things this way. So yeah, just, yeah, there's something about traveling and visiting these different places where you just, first of all, you're doing something that's new. You're doing things that are exciting.
Right.
I love adventure, grew up with adventure movies and all those things. And I just always wanted to live a life that was very uncommon. Right. And I
Yeah.
realized that whenever it becomes too, I don't know, like there's nothing wrong with routine, but there's
Sure.
something in us that wants to progress forward. And I think you mentioned progress earlier, and that was something that Tony Robbins always said is the true measure of success is progress, and progress is it. So for me, every time I take a trip or I, try something different that I've never done before, that's
Yeah.
progress because I'm moving myself into a place of uncertainty, the unknown. That's where growth is.
Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. When I started traveling to Europe, I saw a different aspect of the world altogether and understanding how things are done differently. And, not taking for granted how things are done here in the States. But as you said, like having those conversations with people and just learning,
Mm,
it's one thing like you can watch a show about it, which is amazing. I'm not saying go and spend all your money and go travel and be broke. No, but it's something I think at some point in everyone's life should try to do something small or get a chance to visit certain spots in the world to really open your eyes to things and maybe
mhm,
realize some places are not for you, and that's okay too. I may not
mhm,
like this city or this city might. Well, at least now you know.
mm,
You can go back and say I didn't like that.
mhm,
It's better to experience that than not try that. I think a lot of
mhm,
times I've had a lot of friends who are so against like, oh, they do this in Europe, they do this in Japan, this and they do this in Asian cultures, this and this. Like, but you a certain aspect of what you see here, and I think New York City. At least I've been thankful to live in two major cities like San Francisco and the Bay Area, and live in New York. Diversity is everything, and
mm,
if anything, it just intrigues your mind more to see what else is out there. I mean, New York City
mhm,
is a melting pot of everything, diverse and
mhm,
cultures, and so it just inspires you to want to see more of those things. And
mhm,
you're kind of the gateway here, and to go over those places and do that and learn so much. It's scary, as you said. It's scary.
mhm,
You need to make sure you don't want to do something stupid or culturally insensitive. It might happen, but you learn from those mistakes. Once again, we're
mhm,
not perfect people. No one's gonna expect you to learn French or at least know the French way every time. Educate yourself, obviously. Like don't go there
mhm,
and be an American and just do crazy shit. But you're gonna make mistakes along the way. But just learn from those things, understand it, and take it in for what it is,
mhm,
and
mhm,
add it to your register of like, and also just see how things are done differently. It's like, I
mhm,
don't know if the French are the best way to put this because God knows their working habits are a lot different than ours.
mhm,
But then again, we work a lot hard here in the United States. But it's just a matter of learning the differences in that and seeing that
mhm.
and being like, huh, okay, that's a different way of seeing things I didn't think I'd see before.
Yeah.
So I think that's amazing that that's happened for you, and I hope people take the chance to really do that for themselves as well.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, yeah, the experiences too. I mean, that becomes your story. Like that's when you
yeah,
experience something, it becomes
yeah,
a story. And then the story is what you end up telling people later on. Oh, I went to Thailand and I experienced this, this, and this. And
oh
if
yeah,
you hadn't gone there,
yeah.
you wouldn't have those stories to tell. I think
No,
I love telling stories about well, like anything really. But I mean, their stories is based from that experience and also from your perception of that experience as well. Whether
yes,
you
yes,
frame it as a good thing or a bad thing, it just is what it is, right? So, I look just yeah, I mean, I've made lots of cultural mistakes, and I've always, said things I shouldn't have said and did this and that. But that led to something else, and that became a story in and of itself. Like, oh, I did this, and somebody got upset with me because
Yeah.
but you learn from that, of course, and it's like, well, next time I'm in that situation, I probably won't do that. I'll make other
Yeah.
mistakes. Those become stories too. I mean, that's what makes things interesting, So.
It does. You're right. You're for telling your story. You're finding ways to learn things, and you're trying to always expand your horizons and growth. And you're gonna, like I said, we're gonna make mistakes along the way, but I think it's always great. And I tell people, it's funny. When I go a lot to Scotland, and I go, just got back from Ireland. It's no different than things you do at home. People think it's so grand and so gesture, this and that. It's like they're just living their lives just like you. It's just a different way of doing things. There's different ways of how cultures are run and how upbringings are, but at the end of the day, it's not that much different, So people who say, "Oh, I'm so scared of it may be so different. I don't know how I'm going to adjust." They're just like you. They're just like us. I mean, it's no different. Like it's just a different way of doing it. There's one way we may do something versus they don't do it that way. There's certain traditions they do that are not traditions that we do. And it's just being okay with that and realizing it's not the same, and that's okay. It's totally not a bad thing. I think we get a little bit of prejudges. I know I get a lot of my New York side, and I'm just like, oh, this ain't New York, But I think because I've been here so long, I get so used to it. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I still appreciate the experience. But I'll always be a New Yorker at heart, and I'm like, well, that's how they do things. That's how we do things. And I'm like London, like their bars close at midnight. I'm like, what is that? Here in New York, it's like 4 a.m. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's weird to me. I'm like, what? No, that's strange. But hey, that's how things are done there. So you learn different ways of doing that.
For sure.
What is it? What is it like? What has it been like for you in Japan, and how does being there inspire you to become more creative in your own life? It's one of my bucket list places to go. Hopefully, one day, knock on wood, make it happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been here for such a long time. I mean, I think it was a long time. It's coming up on probably half my life. But what I loved about it is that, so I live in Okayama City, which is about an hour outside of Osaka. And the great thing is that the transportation system here, first of all, I never feel isolated or secluded. I can get to a station, be on a train in 5 minutes, like one of those bullet trains that moves at like 300 miles an hour. And I can be in Osaka, which is a whole different world. I can be in Kyoto 10 minutes after that, and Tokyo within a few hours. So I can go to like all these different places, and every one of them's like a different world whenever you step into it. So again, culturally, it's been an amazing experience. I've also worked in the business sector for a long time, and sure, there's a lot of things that I have to adapt to, but that just, for me, that's part of the the path of mental toughness, is like it just makes you stronger for things. Like it opens up other opportunities too. So the experience of relationships, like meeting so many different people with so many different backgrounds and careers and things that they've done, like just having those connections. And this comes back to like the traveling concept we were talking about. Like when you're traveling, you meet people, you make those connections, whether you just meet them for 5 minutes or for whether you end up working with them for a long time. But what I love about just coming back to the adventure of living here. I mean, not every day is an adventure, maybe, but that depends on how you look at it.
How you live your life and what you do.
We went to Kyoto recently, though, and just had a great time. Like we're going through some of these ancient temples that have been there for 1,000 years or more. And I spent like the morning meditating with these Buddhist monks that in this one of the oldest temples in Kyoto. And I'm thinking, like, you have to actually stop and go, like, this is actually pretty neat. I mean, this isn't something that most people do in their usual day, so things like that I just started to really appreciate a lot more. And that's what I just love about I think traveling, as well as like seeing I don't know, like the Golden Pavilion in Bangkok, like something. Before I left Canada, I went I decided to go traveling. I had
Mm-hmm.
a vision and a dream of going to these places, walking on the Great Wall of China, which I eventually did, scuba diving in Palau. Like I had a
Wow.
bucket list of things that I wanted to do. And I had no idea how I was going to do them, or if they're going to happen, but they were down on paper. They were part of my, I guess, my goals framework,
Yeah.
and eventually ended up in doing those things. Right. But I mean, those were just experiences that are just priceless, like, but, yeah, I think that was just, coming back to, um, the, building an adventure for yourself. That's really one of the things that I think I'm just all about, is like building a great life. And then sure,
Yeah.
sharing that with other people and showing them that, especially, yeah, it might be a little bit scary, but then again, what isn't?
What
I mean,
isn't? Yeah.
like,
What isn't? Yeah. What
if
isn't? Yeah.
if you don't do it, then you're going to be doing something with your time. Why not
Yeah.
do something that, is like put yourself out there a little bit? And coming back to the creativity, by the way. So, um, yeah, I think the creativity side of things, like writing is creative. I mean, there's also the
Mhm.
business side of things as well.
Sure.
But for me, like creativity is like, I think we're all creative, by the way. I think we all can be creative, whether it is music, writing, art. There's something that everybody can be doing that's creative. We just forget how to do it, because in school we learn to finger paint maybe and do things like that, but we
Yeah.
stop doing that eventually. And those are the things that's fun. So I just love creativity. And when I'm not being creative, I feel like I'm probably just I feel like I'm declining in a sense, and you can
Yeah.
be creative in many different ways too. Like traveling is actually creative in a lot of ways, because you're creating an experience, you're creating the adventure, you're creating your future, actually, your
Yeah.
destiny.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. All right. I'm putting it out here. 2025. I'm going to Tokyo.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
doing my long term. Doing my
Yeah.
long term goal setting. Yeah. It's it's so great. Yeah, because that's part of the world I haven't been to yet, and um, just to be able to experience that. The sad part is like all my friends have gone and told me about it, and I'm like the only one in my
Mhm.
friend group who's not gone. And I'm just like,
Mm.
and I hear the stories and I come back, and I'm like, I hate every single one of you. I don't hate them, but
Mhm.
it's just like, all right, I need to get on this bandwagon and just at least have it for myself, because it's one good, like you said, it's
Mm.
one thing to have those stories and see it and
Mm.
understand it, but like to have that experience of your own, I think is more important than anything else. To have
Mm.
your own memories, your own kind of internal journal of what you went through.
Mhm.
And that as well, and I think it's
Mm.
always important to remember that, yes, your friends could do the same exact thing. Yes, it could be here, but that's their journey.
Mhm.
It's really about your journey at the end of the day, and what you take from that journey, and how
Mm.
you make it your own. How does that help you improve yourself, and grow yourself
Mhm.
mentally, everything else along the way. So,
Yeah. Well, I think the name of the game is to have no regrets. I mean, we all have some regrets,
yes,
I'm sure,
of
but I mean,
course, of course you do.
you don't
Yeah.
have to have more than that. You don't have to fill your
No,
bucket with it,
no,
right? So
no.
I'm just like, I can't remember who the nurse was, but she is a famous story. It's like the five regrets. I think she had, I think she was a nurse in Australia, and she had interviewed a bunch of people who were like older people that were dying, and
Hmm.
they were having, they're in their last days, and she'd asked them,
Oh
well,
wow.
what are five things that you regret? And I think one of them that was most common among everybody is like, I wish I'd lived a life that was true to myself. So,
Yeah.
and although it may, you can, I may have said earlier, like it's never too late to do what you want to do, but actually someday it will be.
That's very
So,
true. Yeah.
you can either work hard at it now and do the hard things now, or you can regret later not doing those things. And that's where also the concept of do the hard things first is really based on like, do I want to suffer now or suffer later?
Mm.
And the
Wow.
word suffering might be a little heavy, but it's really comes down to like, do I want to work? So if you pay now, you can play later, right?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
might pay
Yeah.
now and work harder later, but at least if you pay now, you put in the time now, you're
Yeah.
going to like momentum will kick in. You're going to, 5, 10 years from now, or a year from now, like whatever the time frame is, you're going to get to a stage where you're like, wow, I'm actually glad. Like I look back now and realize like there are times I could have given up on this thing. There are times when
Yeah.
maybe if I had just, you know, done something else or done something different, or if I'd fallen into that, that distraction, or listened to that person who told me, you can't actually do that. That's not possible. Well, I believed in those things. Maybe I wouldn't have taken action, and then I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You've got to really know what path it is that you want to cut for. Like, where do you want to go? So it's really like, what do you want? How are you going to get it? And showing up every day to work at it, right? Those three things.
Wow, I love that. Thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much for that, Scott. And so the next book that's coming out, when is the release date for that?
So I have one in pre-order right now, Empower Your Wealth. It's part of my empowerment series, and that'll be
Okay.
coming out the first week of May. I
Look
actually,
at
the book's are already up on today. The paperback and the hardcover are already available. The ebook is in pre-order, so people can pre-order it, or they can even buy the paperback today if they want to. But
Okay.
they do the hard things first. There's a fourth book coming out, and that I'm just working on it now, actually, and that'll be coming out in most likely June. We haven't set a solid date for it yet, but that series actually will have six books in it. The
Wow.
next one is on how to overcome shiny object syndrome, which ties in a lot to doing the hard things first, because
Yeah.
chasing shiny objects is a real thing. Yeah,
Oh man. Yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
yeah.
And where can
And
people find you, Scott?
yes,
You have a website?
yeah, so they can go to scottallenbooks.com. We have a Shopify store where it's
Oh,
we're still
perfect.
putting on some finishing touches to it, but it'll be mostly functional within the next week or two. They can actually go there and buy stuff. But yeah, we're building out a great store there. And scottallenpublishing.com is just a site where they can go and check out the books, and we have a blog on there, stuff like that. And then, of course, they can always go to Amazon, where everything else is located, and
Everything.
you can find all the books on there, and you can, like, depending on the country that you're living in, and you can order, Do the Hard Things First, I think, is in 16 languages. So
Oh wow.
right
Okay.
now we have it in 9 languages. The other languages are coming out this year: Vietnamese, Thai, Indonesian. I've got contracts with a bunch of other independent publishers that are translating
Wow.
those, and so you can probably pick the book up. They're preparing it now for release in Japan later this year as well. So
That's amazing. Well, Scott, thanks again so much for talking with us and sharing your journey and your tips for procrastination. I hope this really helps people out. Definitely will help me out. And getting better at things and learning to not be so harsh on ourselves, and learning that it's okay to fail. And, the big tasks, you just have to break them down and have a blueprint, and you can get it done. There's
mm-hmm.
always a key to getting things done, and be open to change,
Mm-hmm.
and be open to, you know, um, having a self accountability, and knowing you could do better. I think that's always important. Have love in yourself. Love yourself. Everything else will follow after.
Absolutely. Yeah. And keep pushing forward.
Yeah. Well, Scott, thanks again. I appreciate it. Such a great time talking with you.
All right. Thank you for having me on the show. It's been great.
Of course.